All right. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us again today. We're excited to have Mark Veenstra host part 2 on today's webinar series, Managing Mental Health with COVID-19 and Your Professional Life. Before I welcome Mark, just a few brief housekeeping notes. We do have the chat available on the side for you to ask questions, and there will be a few breaks throughout the presentation for Mark to answer your questions. Once the webinar is concluded, we will be sending out an email with the tools that Mark has created, along with the playback link to this presentation. Thank you, Mark, for joining us, and take it away.
You're welcome. Very good. Thank you. She's going to pull up some slides now so we can get going. Thank you again to Landscape Ontario for this opportunity and for making mental health a real forefront in this time of stress under COVID-19. So just a little bit about myself again. I'm the owner of Small Jobs Landscaping. We're a small landscaping company out here in Clarington, Ontario. We're excited. We had a big ad campaign this year to launch our 10th year in service, and that sort of fizzled out now with the current situation. I have been a member of Landscape Ontario for the past 7 years. And then I wear several hats in my life. So my other hats are, I'm a registered psychotherapist with a private practice, and I work in a clinic as well in Oshawa. I'm a husband of 17 years to my wife, Sarah. And then I have 4 kids that are energetic and can be a little silly, as you can see from the picture above. So today we're looking at managing your mental health, managing mental health with COVID-19 in your professional life. And in that, we're going to look at several aspects. We're looking at yourself as an employer, how that interplays with your customers, how mental health interplays with your employees. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the mental health first aid, and then looking at some ideas and resources that you can use for yourself and for your company. So as an employer, you're wearing many hats. I've listed a bunch here that we play with, and those hats pull us in many directions. And now with COVID-19 and the new regulations and challenges and changes on a daily basis, we even have new things that we're like fortune tellers, and what are we supposed to do? And people are coming to us with answers. So just recognizing that there are a lot of demands on us as an employer, and on any given day, and now we have these extra demands with COVID-19. So it's really important that as an employer, we're managing our own mental health. If you look at the image that I have put up here, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. And that is such a true statement. Like, if we're not in the space that we need to be in, we're not going to be able to make the decisions that we're being called to make in this crazy time. It's going to impact our family, our interactions with our customers, and our interactions with our employees. So we really want to take a moment to focus on our own mental health and go from there. Sorry, something just popped up on my screen, so I couldn't advance the slide. So in a regular season, we have a lot of demands on us already, especially this time of year. We're making decisions, getting things going, making sure the company's ready to go. And now with the curveball that's been thrown at us with COVID-19 and the restrictions and the self-isolation and the physical distancing we have to do, we've got more stresses on us. And if you've watched the first webinar, you would have heard about me talking about sort of the emotional regulation and how that works. And that if we get too emotionally wound up, our biology actually takes over and kicks in into what we call an amygdala hijack. And in that situation, our biology actually takes over and makes us into a reactionary beast versus a thinking beast. It turns off the thinking centers of our brain. So as an employer, we really can't have that happening, because we're going to make rash decisions, impulsive decisions that feel good in the moment but aren't actually wise decisions for our business. So we want to manage our emotions so we can avoid the amygdala hijack and be present and in the moment to make these decisions that we need to make in a wise manner. As an employer, again, on a regular basis, we have a lot of demands, and it does affect your family. And we want to make sure that we're impacting the ones around us as little as we can in a negative way. We want to be there. So if we have our stuff together and we are able to be present with our family, we can actually be there, not just physically, but emotionally, because our families do need us right now, because everybody is stressed. Everybody's confused. Everybody's wondering what to do. So if we keep ourselves as the employer, we can be there for our family for what they need. And it helps that then we aren't having those business stresses leaking out into our family, creating a more negative environment for our families. When it comes to our customers, we want to be making sure we're there for our customers. We want to be the calming influence, because they're going to be coming to us in a state of confusion and panic. It might be financial, that they've committed to something that now they aren't sure they can commit to. They're wondering if our jobs are ever going to get done and what money they're going to lose if we back out of the job. And so we want to think of them as potentially even being in an emotionally, in an amygdala hijack themselves, that they are now not having rational decisions, but they're reacting to their current circumstance. So we want to be that calming influence to help with them. We want to be protecting our relationship, protecting our brand when we're interacting with our customers. So it's really important for us to be grounded. And when we're working with our employees, they're really looking to us to be the guide. We're the leader as the employer. They're looking for us. They already look to us for their paycheck. They already look to us to sustain their families, which is a pressure on us. And in this time, it adds another layer of pressure that we know we aren't able to do the things we want to do to support them. So we need to be that calming influence for them. We want to maintain our relationships with our employees, and we want to be present with them when they're speaking. We don't want to be distracted by stuff. So really being grounded is an important thing for us as employers. So a lot of the resources, you've heard me talk about a couple of things about being grounded, about avoiding the amygdala hijack and things like that. We talked about that in the first webinar. I've added a few resources here from things I've talked about and things I've found while I was researching for this one. But really, I would reference the first one. If you're having trouble managing those emotions, that you look at those and check out some of those resources, because it's really important as the business owner that we have our stuff together so we can be there for those that are depending on us. So I'm going to pause a quick moment to see if there's any questions.
Nope, no questions.
Okay. So when we think of mental health, and I was mostly looking at this webinar to talk about you as a business owner and your employees, but it did come to my attention that maybe I should touch on customers, because like I said earlier, your customers are going to be in a similar situation as everybody else, where they are confused and they might have committed to stuff. So how are we going to communicate with them? You really want to be present with them and listen to what their concerns are, and really work at hearing what they have to say, working with them to see what the solutions might be. And you want to communicate honestly with them. I really have appreciated the other webinars I've seen Landscape Ontario put out, where business owners and Landscape Ontario is like, we don't know what's going on and we just need to be honest with people. It is a great way to maintain relationships, even if the honest answer is, I actually don't know. I don't have an answer for you right now. And as soon as I do, I will get back to you. That is more reassuring than either having something that seems unrealistic or something that is inaccurate. So just to be honest about where you're at, what your intentions are going to be, what your plans might be, are important to communicate to your customer to help maintain their trust in your company and to maintain their belief in your brand. Any questions about customers? I know we just had a question break.
No.
All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about employees. I think a good stance to come from is to assume they are going to be in a bit more of a, as we would say, emotionally aroused state. So they might be closer to an amygdala hijack, where they're running on panic mode because they don't know where their paycheck's coming from. They don't know what we can do for them. They're worried about their families. So recognize that they might be coming in this emotional state that is not going to have them interacting well. They might be short. They might be frustrated. You might hear some of their angst aimed at you when it's not really meant to be at you. So if we come in assuming they're not managing well, it puts us in a different position to recognize the way they're interacting with us. And then what we really want to do is be a source of calm for them. And so we want to look at being present to listen to them. Being available to your employees to talk to is going to be super important right now. And what that means is that we're not distracted by the phone that's ringing. We can deal with that phone call after. Let's be with the employee, hear what they're having to say. And really look to hear the content of what they're saying, which sometimes means looking back past the words they're using. Sometimes they might be using harsh words that might feel bad to us in the moment, but we want to look past that for the moment, recognizing that they're speaking out of a place of emotion rather than a place of logic. Again, we want to be honest with them. We want to validate their emotions. We want to recognize the current situation, like let them know where we're at, and let them know that they're valued to the company. And if we can, we'll see what supports we can offer them, either within the company or outside of the company, to make sure that they're being cared for and they're getting their needs met. So I've mentioned some terms and some things to do when it comes to communicating. So I want to go through some of those ideas right now when it comes to how we communicate with our customers, with our employees. The first thing comes to listening. I know we hear about listening all the time, and what does that mean to listen? Again, I want to stress being present. You want to be in that moment, especially when people are a bit emotionally charged. If you're distracted, they're not going to think they're being heard, which will just increase their emotional angst. You might want to employ something called reflective listening. Sometimes it's just a matter of hearing what they have to say and just reflecting that back. So I'm not sure if a customer's like, I'm not sure you're going to be able to get this job done, and I'm really concerned I'm going to lose my money. You can just say, I hear that you're concerned you're going to lose your money because you don't think we're getting this job done this year. And let that sit there. And they'll say, yeah, that's what I think. So they know that you're heard. That also is a good way to make sure you've heard the proper message, because it's really important that as a good listener, we are hearing the intended message, not necessarily the words that are being spoken. So in times we have to ask clarifying questions. So if something seems off, if they seem to be accusing you of wrong, you can ask, are you thinking I'm trying to get away with something here? I just want to be clear because it's not my intention. So ask the questions to make sure you're hearing what they're wanting you to hear. And then our verbal communications. I really like what I've been hearing from the webinars through Landscape Ontario about how to talk to people, just to being honest about where things are at. There is a whole lot of things we don't know. And to be honest about, we don't know. We don't know when we can start working. We don't know when our season's going to begin. Builds trust better than we're going to get to you as soon as possible and making it feel like people are getting blown off, or if they're feeling like you're making up stuff or coming up with false information. One of the things we want to do when we're being honest with people, though, is we want to be honest with the facts. It's really easy to be honest with intentions, but you don't want to say something you can't follow through with. And when we're looking at employees, like at this time, I know people are looking at some difficult decisions. They're looking at potential layoffs and stuff like that. So to give people a false hope that their job is protected and that they're not going to get laid off isn't going to build a good relationship. Talking about, I don't know who I need to lay off, I'm really taking that seriously, versus saying, well, you're really valued and you'd be one of the last ones that I would need to lay off, even though you might have to lay off everybody, gives a false sense of hope. And we don't want to do that. So we want to be just real with where we're at right now. And so that sometimes means that right now, today, no one's getting laid off. And I know everybody's going to get a paycheck at next paycheck. And that's as far as I can plan right now. That might be the message you're giving. So just be sure that you're able to follow through with what you're saying. Even though you might have good intentions and you are feeling like you're being honest, you want to make sure those messages are clear. Similar to what I talked about when it came to our job as a listener, to ensure that we are hearing the message that we want to, that the speaker is wanting us to hear, we want to make sure the message that we are speaking about is heard in the way we want it to be heard. So sometimes when people especially are emotionally wound up, they're not going to hear the intent. They're not going to hear that content of the message. So we want to ensure that they are. So things like asking follow-up questions, asking to have things repeated. So you heard what I said about the next paycheck, right? I can only guarantee one more paycheck, right? What did you hear from me? Okay, yeah, I'm only going to be able to get to one more paycheck and then we're reevaluating. Perfect. I'm glad you understood that. Those are great ways to make sure people are hearing the way that you want the message to be relayed. I've mentioned many times about validating emotion. This can be a bit of a complicated concept for people to understand. Most people think of validation as like, good job, well done, I'm proud of you. Those are great validations to help boost emotion. But when you validate an emotion, we're more talking about recognizing the emotion, recognizing and trying to be present in that emotion. So when, say, an employee is coming to you and saying, I'm really stressed, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills if we can't start the season soon, to be able to say, you know what, that is totally understandable that you'd be that stressed. I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm going to do my best to try to manage with you and try to get the season going, and I'm limited to what I can. So you hear all our message, but that point at the beginning was, I heard your emotion. I heard that this is super frustrating. I heard this is very scary. So just to let them know that what they're feeling is honored and not blowing that off for the logistics. One of the ways that is really good to work at validating emotion that we don't do well in our society is we like to use but. So we like to say stuff like, yeah, that's really hard, but I have to do the scheduling the way I need to, so you can't have as many shifts as you like. Really invalidates that first part where we say we recognize the emotion. I want to encourage people, and it's a strange strategy, but highly effective, is try to change as many of your buts in your language to ands. So instead of saying, I hear you're really stressed about how you're going to provide for your family, but we need to be safe in this environment, say, I hear that you're really stressed about what's going on with your family, and we need to be conscious of safety. That and really connects the two thoughts. It really helps to bring that other part forward versus cutting it off and invalidating it. And it works in many, many aspects of our life. It's actually an interesting exercise just to see how many buts you can take out in your life and just replace them with ands. The other caution I would give is avoiding things like saying, I understand. When somebody's coming to you upset about the stress they're having in their family, you're experiencing stress yourself. To say I understand doesn't necessarily fit with what their personal experience is. Things like saying, I hear what you're saying, I can relate to that. Those are relational comments that don't take away from that person because they have their own unique experience. Even though it might look exactly the same, we don't want to assume that they have the same experience. So having that language of, I hear what you're saying, I can relate to that, that sounds really tough, at times is more supportive than saying, I understand. So what are the practical supports? So we want to look at the supports that we can potentially provide. I've heard some great things that people are able to do. I heard in other webinars that people are able to give like grocery cards to their employees and stuff just to try to take the edge off. It's important to do what we can to support our employees, to help manage their stress, and to offer different supports where we can. And so it's really important to find out what they need. Where are they at? I have a very small employee pool, so I'm in contact with them regularly, just saying, is there anything you need? I can see what I can do to support that. Recognizing we are limited in what we can do. So whatever we can do to help them, to help ease their mind, to help lower their stress, and keep the connection with you is going to be important in this time. So the other aspect, and that's one of the things that we're here to talk about today, is the mental health supports that we can offer to our staff as we're looking in these stressful times and times where we're really having emotional concerns. One of the things I think is the biggest, and it's still profound in our society, is the stigma against mental health. The idea of getting support from a professional. People think, well, I'm not crazy. I don't need support. You'll notice in the two talks I've given about mental health, I actually haven't really talked about any diagnostics. I haven't talked about depression, bipolar, and all those things, because it's not necessarily about a diagnosis. It's about the need for emotional support. So to bring that into your culture of your business, about that seeking support is not a problem, that it's normal, and it doesn't have to mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that you're overwhelmed right now, or you can see in the picture, there's lots of examples of why somebody might need a support through especially situations like COVID-19. And I encourage you to get support as an employer, as well as encourage your employees to get support. I've included some resources that will be listed on the email that you get to access supports in your area. Are there any questions at this point?
No questions right now.
Okay. One of the things I was asked to look at is the mental health first aid. I'm not a mental health first aid trainer. Oddly enough, I've never taken mental health first aid. I do understand the concept and have had some briefings around it. I equate it a little bit to doctors aren't good at first aid too, because they've trained past that. So my training has led me to deal with some of the more complex mental health issues, and I understand the rationale for mental health first aid, and I do think it's an important thing to just have, like we have first aid officers on our crews. I think it'd be great if people started having a mental health first aid trained person on their crew as well. As it says on the slide, 1 in 5 Canadians experience mental health concerns every year. Some stats actually have that as 1 in 4. So when you think of the size of your crew and how many people you have working for you, just think of how many people on your crew already prior to this might be having concerns with their mental health. And then we're going to add the extra stresses of all these unknowns and inability to meet basic needs, how that's going to change that number. So the acronym they use in the mental health first aid is ALGE. And that's the model that typically is used. I've pulled this information off the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And that seems to be the sort of hub of where the mental health first aid training is. Unfortunately, it'd be great if they had online training right now, because we could all be going and getting that done. Unfortunately, they're only in-person trainings because there's a lot of interactive work. So hopefully when this all lifts, that we can get some work going, but also we can get some mental health first aid training. I wanted to go through a couple of the aspects just to demystify some of the myths that might be around some of these concepts. And primarily I'm looking at the first, where it's assess the risk for suicide or self-harm. It's important that we are aware of what those things are, what the intentions for suicide are, because people don't come out and just say, I feel like killing myself. That tends to be more in the movies. What you'll start to hear from people is things like, wow, I just don't know how I'm going to get through the rest of this day. I don't know how I can make it to the end of this week. I think things would be better off if I just wasn't here. Those type of hopeless and sort of definitive answer, like things about not wanting to be around, are really the red flags that we have for people that might be contemplating suicide. And the trick with this is, in this situation under the extreme stress, it is something that we will most likely start to see more of, people that think they can't get through this, especially the longer it goes and the more financial strains come on. So it is something to be primed to hear those type of messaging. And what is thought of in our society is that if we talk about it, it will happen. So if I ask somebody about suicide, if I say, wow, that sounds really hopeless, are you thinking about suicide? We think we put that idea in their head. Most likely, if we're thinking it, they are already thinking it. So to ask the question, if you have a concern, is not a risk factor to increase the need for suicide. It shows concern, and it shows that it's okay to talk about. And if the person is in that state, we can definitely look to resource the help that they would need to avoid that. In the moment, you just want to listen to them in a non-judgmental way, which is the second part of algae. And that's just really hearing it. That's some of that validation I talked about, saying, this sounds really, like, it's really tough for you right now. You're so stressed that you think death is a better answer. That's horrible. Can we get some help? Can we make a few phone calls? I want to make sure you're safe. Reassuring them that you're not going to judge them, that it's not something that they need to be embarrassed about. So that's sort of the little nutshell of what we need to do is, and I just wanted to prime people to just listen for those sort of hopeless statements and be able to talk about suicide openly, and then be able to access the supports. So what it probably is beneficial as owners is look through some of the resources that I've pulled together when you get them, to be aware already of what they are, so we're not looking for them when we need them and having to struggle at that point. So the ideas and resources that we can have available to us, it is actually a really interesting and exciting part that you can look at as an employer. It's something that you can do to feel like you're doing something versus feeling a bit helpless, and you can get creative with it. When you know what your employees need, like I said before, I've heard things like getting gift cards for people, finding the odd jobs that they can do for a bit of a paycheck, looking for the resources that the government is putting out and making it easy for them to access. Those are all things we can think of, and you can be creative. I put up on the resource list, I've put up a workbook that's put out by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. It's a fairly simple book, just about looking at things you're grateful for in that day, gratitude journaling. And it might be something that you develop your own. You look at something there and say, I'm going to make this email blast that I'm going to send out every day to all my guys, that I want to just hear back what's something good they had in their day. You can be as creative as you want to increase that interaction and to help breed hope within everybody in these confusing times. You can schedule regular Zoom meetings. Zoom is a great platform. It's free for up to, I think, 200 something. It's a big number, for up to 40 minutes. And if you pay, you can have more people and more time. I'm not sure where people are at when it comes to benefit programs. I know Hort Protect is out there. I'm not sure how many people use it. I did a little bit of researching, and they do have an EAP. So that's the Employee Assistance Plan, which offers counseling through the benefit. It might be something, if you have Hort Protect and that's not a part of your package, that you add that to it. It might be even just something that you are able to pull together a bit of funds right now for people that you see might need some support, that they can, you can say, you know what, I'll pay for a couple of sessions for you to just talk to somebody professional, because this is more than my training as an owner has to do. And there's lots of e-therapies out there that you can look at. You might be able to talk when you look at Ontario 211, see what counselors and counseling agencies are in your area. You might be able to talk to them and say, look, I just want to get my guys through this situation. Can we work out a deal? They might be able to say, yeah, we can prorate a couple of sessions just in this time period to get people through. There's lots of people adjusting their schedules, doing shorter sessions, just doing check-ins and things like that for employees and first responders and stuff like that to help manage the situation. And I've mentioned a couple times, so get yourself familiar with the resources in your area. Ontario 211 is a great resource to have at your fingertips, because you just put in whatever area you're in and you're looking for whatever supports you need when it comes to social services. You can have crisis lines, it has food banks, it has all sorts of resources that you can have at your fingertips, and they'll be local to where you're at. So that is actually my presentation. I know it's a little shorter than people might have been expecting, and it is a lot of information. So if there are any questions, feel free to post them up. I can even give you a minute to do that.
No questions yet.
I don't know if you want to give people a second to do that. Or...
Laura and Lindsay both say thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll put my next slide up. I'd say thank you to you guys.
All right.
So yeah, and I'm not hard to find. I have Facebook. I'm online. You can just Google Mark Veenstra, and I show up all over the place. So if people have questions they want to ask, they can. If there's themes starting to come up that Landscape Ontario sees that I might be able to assist with again, I'm more than happy to see what I can do.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. On behalf of Landscape Ontario and our COVID task force, we want to thank you again for joining us and sharing all this wonderful information that you've shared over the past 2 days. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. And just as a reminder that this webinar has been recorded and will be emailed out along with the resources that Mark has provided. So for more information and resources on the COVID-19, including upcoming webinars, visit our horttrades.com website. And thanks so much, everyone, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.